Hello and welcome to the Apostolic Resource Center. It's so good to talk with you all this morning. Today is Elul 295780. That means that we are on the eve of the new year 5781. And my goodness gracious, the beginning of this new decade has been unprecedented. The decade of the mouth, 5780. 80 means pay. It's a decade. It means the mouth, because in Hebrew, numbers are letters and they are symbols. And the number 80 means the mouth. It's the symbol of the mouth. It means to speak, to declare, to announce. And my goodness gracious, what a way to enter into the new decade, as we were told we had to have our faces covered, as we were told we were to keep our mouth shut. In the decade of the mouth. Woo, Jesus. You know, the thing is, though, the first fruits belong to the Lord. And so some of the things that the Lord showed me about 5780, the decade of the mouth, was when Elizabeth was about to get pregnant. Zechariah went into the temple in Luke chapter 3, and he had a vision, and he was told, your wife's going to give birth to a son, and he could not believe it. And so what happened? He was silenced for 9 months. The Lord said, that's it. I got to silence you, because what I need to accomplish, I can't have you speaking things that aren't true about what I'm saying. And so the Lord muzzled the mouth of Zechariah for 9 months. Remember when they came into their first city? Remember, that was their firstborn child for Zechariah and Elizabeth. When they came into their first city in the promised land, it was Jericho. And what did God do with the army of Israel in Joshua chapter 6 and 7? He told them to be silent, to keep their mouth shut, and march. And he said, I'll let you know when to shout, but until I tell you to shout, keep your mouth shut. So I really believe that this decade of pay, this decade of the mouth, this new era in which we have entered, the reason we had to enter it with our mouths covered, with a sense of silence, with a sense of unprecedented activity going on all around us, was because God is going to do something so supernatural that literally he did not want us to put our mouth on it. He didn't want us to be able to take credit for it. He didn't want us to be able to have any say about it. He has decided what he's going to do. And we are going to see a breakthrough and an advancement of the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, like we have never seen in our life. And so I believe that this first year, 5780, which today is the last day of it, I believe that it was a year of unprecedented things, because the Lord is doing something extremely supernatural. Now, with that being said, I want to share something with you this morning that the Lord revealed to me. First of all, let me say this. I don't know if you know this, but as you move into this new year, 5781, that literally begins at 10:40 a.m. East Central Standard Time on September 18th, 2020, that is sundown in Israel for the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. And it goes for this whole weekend, the 18th through the 20th. They celebrate Rosh Hashanah, which is the Hebrew New Year, which is going to be 5781, the year of apostolic authority. And it is also called the Feast of Trumpets. And so the shofar is going to be blown all weekend long. And it's just fascinating what God is doing. After Feast of Trumpets, 10 days, Yom Kippur, the high holy holiday of the Day of Atonement, when people confess and are forgiven of all their sins. Everything is wiped clean. And then you have October 2nd through the 9th, the Feast of Tabernacles, the time of Sukkot, the time of tabernacling together, the time of celebrating the third and final feast of the Lord. You have the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And it's the third feast in the cycle of the feasts when it comes to Hebrews, the Hebrew children, and also we that have been grafted in. The part that is hard for me is that the church has felt like we've replaced Israel, so then therefore there is no longer a temple. Now there's the church. but there's also no longer for the feasts of the Lord. It's really unfortunate because there's so much revelation in the feasts of the Lord, and actually the calendar of God follows the feasts of the Lord. So a lot of times we are out of time with what God is saying and doing because we do not follow the feasts of the Lord. And if you think about it, this whole Bible is all about the Hebrew people. And if you don't understand the feasts, a lot of times it'll say things and you're like, what does that have anything to do with anything? It has something to do with the cycle of the feast in the calendar of God, in which he caused and called his people to walk. You know, we walk back based on the Gregorian calendar, and we have our new year on January 1st. And so, not that that's a bad thing, but just I think as believers, it's important for us to understand the feasts of the Lord, because this is the Hebrew New Year. And it's the year 5781, and it is a significant year because every year to the Hebrews have a numeric value, but it also has symbolic value. And when you understand what God is saying and doing in a year, it allows you to align with what God is doing. So with all that being said, I don't mean to sound like I'm rambling. I just want to educate you so that you can be in alignment with what the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is saying in this day and in this hour. It is such a powerful time to be alive. I believe that every day that we're given breath in our lungs is an incredible time to be alive. And I want to share something with you the Lord revealed to me this morning, but I also want to encourage you with something. One thing that I have learned as of recently is that one of the things that the Hebrews did, not only did they study the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that was kind of their main books that they would study, but also they would pray the Psalms and read the prophets. And so the reason they would read the prophets is so that they could have a sense of where God was taking them as a people, and also so they could remember their history of God's faithfulness. But the cool thing is that they would pray the Psalms consistently and continually. And I think one of the things that we as believers miss is how much we can learn from the prayer book called the Psalms. The book of Psalms is a prayer book. You know, in different denominations, the Anglican denomination, they had a common book of prayer. In the Lutheran denomination, we had the green hymnal, and it had prayers in it. And so I think that if we understood that Psalms was a prayer book, we would pray it more often. And if you take a psalm a day and pray it, what you will find is that you are beginning to align yourself with the heart of God, and you will gain insights and revelation into things that God is saying and doing in now time, whether for you personally, for your community corporately, or for the nation or the nations internationally. And so anyway, I was praying Psalm 3 today because I've been on a countdown to the end of Rosh Hashanah. So I'm on Psalm 3, tomorrow will be Psalm 2, and then Sunday will be Psalm 1, and it'll be a great time of jubilation as we prepare this new year. But anyway, I was praying Psalm 3 today, and I just want to share something that the Lord revealed to me. And I hope this encourages you, because this was huge for me. Have you ever felt like you're shadow boxing? You know, when you're in prayer and the voices of the enemy are coming after you, have you ever felt like you're shadow boxing, like, and you're like, you can't seem to hit the enemy, but you know he's there in the air. And so we're praying this and we're praying that and we're shouting this and we're declaring that. And a lot of times we're shadow, jab, uppercut, you know, trying to shadow box with this invisible enemy in the air that we can't ever seem to defeat. We have moments where we're alleviated from his voice, but for the most part, we struggle to defeat him. And the Lord revealed to me this morning, because somewhere along in my Christian life, and maybe in yours, I was told that we should not hear the voice of the enemy. That there's somehow a breach in our wall, and that there's a gap in our soul, or something, somewhere the enemy has gotten a foothold, and that's why he's able to speak to us. But the Lord made it very clear to me this morning, as I was praying Psalm 3, that we will always hear the voice of the enemy. Think of Genesis chapter 1. They were created in paradise, right? Adam and Eve without sin. Sin had not entered the world. And yet by Genesis chapter 3, in that very garden, they were able to hear the voice of the enemy. Now, the obedience to the voice of the enemy is what brought sin. But before there was sin, they still heard the voice of the enemy. And so this teaching that we have been taught somewhere along the line in our Christian walk has actually hindered us, not helped us, because you're going to always hear the voice of the enemy. There is no military in the world that does not know the plans of the enemy, does not know the activity of the enemy, does not listen to the chatter and the talk of the enemy. Why? Because it reveals where the enemy is and what the enemy is planning and plotting. So this idea that we should never hear the voice of the enemy is a teaching that somewhere along the line I picked it up, and maybe some of you picked it up, and it's actually caused us to shadow box an enemy that we are called to defeat. But just because we're called to defeat him doesn't mean that we'll cease to hear him. Because remember, he is the prince of the power of the air. And so David says this in Psalm chapter 3, "O Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him." He was hearing the voice of the enemy saying, God's not going to deliver you from us. We're going to defeat you. We're going to destroy you. We're going to annihilate you. You're never going to be victorious. Sound familiar? You know, a lot of times I think we beat ourselves up because we hear the voice of the enemy, not realizing that of course you're going to hear the voice of the enemy. The victory over the voice of the enemy is not obeying his voice. Your victory over the voice of the enemy is not that you don't hear the enemy, it's that you don't obey the voice of the enemy. Because when you don't obey the voice of the enemy, you remove his authority. That's really the issue. I've been trying to remove the audible voice of the enemy, not recognizing that audible voice that it's not audible, but you know what I'm saying. That voice of the enemy is never going to go away. He's the prince of the power of the air. He's always going to be there. But I remove his authority from my life when I choose to obey the voice of God, not the voice of the enemy. I give authority to the voice of the enemy when I do what he says. But when I don't do what he says, despite the fact that he's he's everywhere. And so I'm shadow boxing, trying to defeat the enemy. And the Lord's like, I waste more energy shadow boxing the voice of an enemy that doesn't have any authority over me. Just because he speaks doesn't mean he has authority. There are so many people that speak, but they don't have any authority. How many people talk, but nobody's doing what they say? That's because they don't have any authority in that person's life. But you see, the voice that you obey, the voice that I obey, that's the voice that has authority in our life. And I'm here to tell you today that the Lord revealed to me through Psalm chapter 3, "Oh Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying to me, God will not deliver him." I don't know about you, but I've heard that voice. But if I choose to obey that voice, I give that voice authority. And when I give that voice authority, then that voice will become a stronghold in my life and I will begin to believe a lie. But just because I hear the voice doesn't mean I have to obey the voice. And if I don't obey the voice, then I agree with David in Psalm 3, verse 3 that says, "But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. You bestow glory on me and lift up my head. To the Lord I cry aloud, and he answers me from his holy hill." You see, the Lord becomes a shield around you when you obey the voice of God and reveal that he's the authority in your life. He becomes a shield around you and he lifts up your head and you start to realize that you're like, of course I'm going to hear the voice of the enemy. He's the prince of the power of air. But just because I hear his voice, I will not obey him. And that's where the victory is. That's where the confidence comes from. That's where the joy comes. Because the Bible says, I prepare a table for you in the presence of your who? Your enemies. I've been spending so much time shadow boxing the enemy, thinking, oh, I've got to this voice. Because somewhere I learned that I wasn't supposed to hear it. And you don't have faith. You don't believe. Yeah. Liar. I hear you. But just because I hear you doesn't mean I'm going to obey you. Anyway, that was super liberating for me. I hope it's liberating for you. Because we are entering into a brand new year. And this year, even though you're going to still hear the voice of the enemy, you don't have to do a thing he says, because he's the father of lies, because he's coming to steal, kill, and destroy. So if you obey him, guess what? He's going to rob you. He's going to destroy you. He's going to want to kill you. But if you choose to not obey him and you obey the voice of God, I'm telling you, my God, today, he will lead you into green pastures. He will give you blessings beyond what you could ask or imagine. He will prove himself faithful, and you will find confidence rising in you, that though you hear the voice of the enemy, he has no power over you. He has no authority over you, because what you do is you take away his authority when you choose to not obey him, but rather obey the voice of the Lord. And remember, Jesus said in John chapter 10, my sheep know my voice, and a stranger they will not follow. It doesn't say that stranger they will not hear. It says a stranger they will not follow. So I encourage you today, on this last day of 5780, as we embark into the brand new day of 5781. First of all, happy Rosh Hashanah. As the trumpet sounds, as the shofar blasts all weekend long, may you know that the Lord is announcing victory. And even though you hear the voice of the enemy, you don't have to submit to it. Obey the Lord your God. Believe his prophets, and you shall prosper. I hope you have a great day. God bless you, and may the Lord keep you in all of your ways. Be encouraged.